Montana Territory, May 1882. The morning sky hung low over Willow Creek, thick with the smell of damp earth and spring frost, as Gilly Langford stood at the edge of a life she never asked for. The church loomed ahead, whitewashed and too quiet, its steeple cutting into the clouds like a knife. Her fingers were cold around the lilac bouquet, and her heart beat like a bird trapped in a box. Folks filled the pews inside, waiting to see her marry a man twice her age. A deal struck between her father and Silas Brogg, local cattle baron and widower who needed a bride with a good name and no voice. Gilly had both. Her father's hand was heavy on her elbow. "You will do this," he muttered, voice a dry snap of bark. "This is your duty." She did not answer. She had not answered for weeks, only nodded, only obeyed, because her mother's grave was still fresh behind the house and her younger brother depended on what little peace remained. Silas had promised to take care of them. That was the arrangement. And Gilly, 21 and tired to the bone, had no way out. Until the church doors opened. He stepped in like a storm, boots dusty, long coat dripping river water from the hem, as if he had crossed half the country to get there. The stranger's dark hair was pushed back from his face, jaw rough with days of travel. His eyes were sharp, unsettled, like he had lived too many lives too fast. He looked straight at her. Gilly's breath caught. Silas turned with a scowl. "Who the hell are you?" The man did not answer him. He walked forward, quiet as dusk, and stopped at the foot of the aisle. "You do not want this," he said to Gilly. His voice was low, steady. "Come with me." The crowd gasped. Her father barked her name, furious. Silas took a step forward, red-faced and growling. But Gilly did not move. The stranger offered his hand. Gilly looked at it like it was the first warm thing she had seen all year. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She had no idea who he was, but she believed him, so she took it. They ran. The church doors burst open behind them, shouts rising, boots pounding. But the man had a horse waiting, black and lean and tied just beyond the fence. He threw Gilly up into the saddle like she weighed nothing and swung up behind her. "Hold on," he said. She did. They rode hard out of Willow Creek, her veil tearing away in the wind, the road blurring beneath them as the town fell behind. They did not stop until the sky went orange and the river ran beside them, fast and cold. He pulled the horse down toward the bank and helped her off gently, as if the whole day had not just caught fire. Gilly stumbled, breathless, hair wild. "What did you just do?" He looked at her like he was still catching up to himself. "Saved you." "From what?" "From a man who wanted a wife like a man wants a barn, quiet, useful, and shut." Her lips parted, a laugh catching in her chest, half sob and half disbelief. "What is your name?" "Dain O'Connell," he said. "Drifter. Scout. Sometimes outlaw, depending who you ask." "And you just happened to be in Willow Creek?" "No," he said. "I went there for you." She blinked. "Why?" He paused, ran a hand through his hair. "Your mother wrote me." Gilly froze. "What?" "6 months ago. Said if anything happened to her, she wanted someone watching your back. Said she did not trust the man they were arranging for you." Her knees gave out, and she sat in the grass, eyes wide. "You knew her?" Dain nodded. "Years back. She helped my mother during a hard winter in Kansas. I never forgot it." Gilly pressed her hands to her face. "She never told me. She did not want you living scared. She just wanted you safe." Silence fell between them, broken only by the rush of water and the beat of her heart slowing down. "You are not going back," he said finally. "No," she whispered. "Not ever." He crouched beside her, voice quiet. "I know a place out past Red Lodge. No one will be looking there. We can stay a while. Get you steady." Gilly looked up at him. "You do not even know me." "I know enough." You did not flinch. "You ran. That tells me more than most people show in a year." She studied him, his hands, his eyes, the way he was not trying to touch her, not trying to fix her, just offering space. "All right," she said. "I will go." They rode again, slower this time. The land stretched wide and open, green with spring and dotted with wildflowers. Gilly leaned into Dain's warmth, her fingers curled in the mane of the horse, her heart starting to settle. By nightfall, they reached an old trapper's cabin tucked in a pine hollow. Dain had restored it years ago and left it empty since. There was a stove, a cot, a creek out back. It was quiet. Safe. He gave her the bed and took the floor. Gilly sat by the fire, watching the flames dance. "You are not what I expected," she said. He glanced over. "What did you expect?" "I do not know. Something rough. Wild. I am those things," he said. "But not to you." She looked at him for a long time. "I think I want to know who you are, Dain O'Connell." He smiled, soft and crooked. "Then I will stay long enough for you to find out." The fire cracked, and for the first time in weeks, Gilly felt warmth that was not borrowed or forced. She pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders and watched him ease into sleep near the hearth, one hand resting on his chest like he still half expected a fight. She watched until her eyes drifted closed. And in the hush between the trees, something new began. The sun rose late behind the mountains. Pale light crept quiet across the cabin floor, brushing the edges of Gilly's skirt where it hung from a peg near the stove. She stood barefoot at the basin, sleeves rolled and hands sunk in cold creek water, scrubbing what little she had brought with her. The morning smelled of pine and damp ash. Outside, a magpie called from somewhere high and hidden. Dain was splitting kindling near the tree line. His coat lay slung over a stump, shirt sleeves pushed past his elbows, revealing arms marked by old scars and long work. Gilly watched him through the open door, a damp cloth clutched in her fingers. "You always work before breakfast?" she asked. He didn't glance up. "Idle hands make poor companions." She stepped outside, wringing the cloth dry. "You plan on staying long enough for idle to be a concern?" The axe paused mid-swing. He looked over, steady-eyed. "That depend on whether I'm needed. I don't need rescuing anymore." "No," he said. "Now you need choices." She sat on the stoop, the boards cold beneath her. "You think they'll come after me?" "Silas ain't the kind to forget a public slight. And your father's pride seems brittle enough to crack." Gilly pulled her knees up, chin resting atop them. "What would you do if you were me?" He sank to a crouch, elbows resting on his knees, axe set aside. "I'd learn how to live without asking anyone else how." Her voice came quiet. "And you'd teach me? If you're willing to work harder than you ever have." "I am." They were quiet for a stretch, wind stirring the trees. Down by the creek, a fox darted between shadows. "Why didn't you just send word?" she asked. "Tell me what my mother had arranged." She wrote half in code. "Said if I came too early, it'd tip off Brock. Said you might not believe a stranger." Gilly traced the grain of the step with her thumb. "I might not be. Not then." Dain stood, brushing pine needles from his trousers. "We'll need more supplies come week's end. I've got a contact near Absorki. Quiet place. Trustworthy folk. I'll come." He hesitated. "It's a long ride." "I can manage," she said. "I'd like to see somewhere that isn't looking at me like I'm a burden." Dain nodded once. "We leave at first light tomorrow." That night, Gilly sat beside the hearth, stitching a tear in her hem by lamplight. Dain returned from the woodpile carrying a haunch of rabbit already dressed. He set it near the fire, his hands red from cold and work. "Where'd you learn to trap?" she asked. "From a man with no teeth and too many stories. He taught me how to read snow too. Said it never lies." She smiled faintly, threading the needle again. "You believe that?" "I believe the earth don't waste time pretending." There was a long pause. "Did you ever want a home?" she asked. "I used to think I had one. Then the war came and took the land, the fence lines, the people. After that it was easier to keep moving." She looked up. "And now?" Dain met her gaze. "Now I think stillness might not be so dangerous." The fire cracked between them. When the meal was done and the lamp turned low, Gilly lay on the cot, her back to the wall, sleep slow to come. The wind rattled the shutters gently, like a reminder that the world still turned beyond these walls. Dain's breathing was even from the floor, the rhythm of someone who had long since learned to rest with one eye open. In the dark, she whispered, "Thank you." He didn't answer right away. Then, soft as a promise, "You're welcome." And for the first time in her life, she believed the words were meant only for her. The saddle leather creaked beneath Gilly as dawn broke pale and windless over the foothills. She rode behind Dain, her fingers curled around the back of the cantle, the hem of her skirt gathered high enough to keep from tangling in the stirrup. The trail bent east along the Stillwater, narrow and muddy from spring thaw, scattered with elk tracks and the flattened prints of wagon wheels long gone. She had never ridden this far, not without someone watching her for mistakes. Now, every mile felt peeled back and clean, like a part of her she hadn't known was waiting to breathe. "Keep your knees loose," Dain said without turning. "Let the horse move under you." "I am. You're gripping like it's the only thing keeping you upright." "It is." He laughed once, short and low. "You'll learn." They rode in silence after that, the kind that didn't press too hard. By midday, they reached high ground where the land widened into a sweep of bare cottonwoods and ragged pasture. Dain slowed his horse and pointed with his chin. "Just beyond that ridge. There's a family, their Dutch roots. Been here since before the war. They run dry goods and don't ask questions." "Do they know you?" "Well enough. I helped their eldest dig a well during a drought 3 years back. His mother fed me cornbread and made me promise not to die." Gilly shaded her eyes with one hand. "Did you?" "Not yet." They reached the homestead near noon, a low storehouse built of stone and timber, backed by a barn with a sagging roof. A woman stood outside, apron tied tight, sleeves rolled to the elbows. Her hair was streaked with gray and pinned in a knot, and she watched their approach with narrowed eyes. Dain swung down first. "Mrs. Voss." She crossed her arms. "You've brought company. This is Gilly Langford. She's looking for a quiet place and honest trade." The woman's gaze lingered on Gilly's face, sharp but not unkind. "You're running from something or towards something?" "Both," Gilly said. Mrs. Voss nodded once. "Then come wash your hands. There's soap in the basin and bread to slice. You can talk while you work." Inside the shop, the air was cool and smelled of beeswax and flour. Gilly stood at the counter, slicing loaves while Dain loaded flour and beans into an old burlap sack. Mrs. Voss sat in a rocking chair near the hearth, mending a child's shirt. "You got people looking for you, girl?" she asked. "Probably. You married?" "No," Mrs. Voss looked to Dain. "And you?" "Not legally," he said. "Not yet." The woman's eyes flicked back to Gilly. "You trust him?" Gilly's hand didn't pause in its work. "I do." "Then you'd best stop glancing at the door every time the wind shifts. If he's worth your trust, then let it settle." They left with goods enough for 2 weeks and 2 new blankets, the weight of Mrs. Voss' words folded into each step of the ride back. The sun set low by the time they reached the cabin, the light stretched thin across the trees. Dain took the sack from Gilly's horse and carried it inside. She followed, arms aching in a good way. "I didn't know people could just live like that," she said, unwrapping one of the loaves. "Like what?" "Without being scared all the time." Dain set the supplies down. "You will. When you're ready." She turned to him, her voice low. "What made you stop running?" He leaned against the post near the hearth, his face unreadable. "I didn't. Not until you took my hand." Gilly folded the bread and cloth and set it aside, her hands suddenly still. "I don't know if I'm brave enough to keep choosing this." "You don't have to be brave every day. Just honest." She stepped closer, the room quiet but for the crack of settling logs. "And what if I want more than just safety?" Dain's voice was rough around the edges. "Then you better tell me now, so I can give it or get out of your way." "I don't want you to get out of my way," she said. He didn't move. "I want you beside me," she added, quieter now. "Not just for the hiding." His hand came up, slow and careful, and brushed a curl away from her cheek. "Then that's where I'll stay." Behind them, the stove ticked with heat. Gilly leaned into him, her forehead against his collarbone, and let silence hold them there. Not because they didn't know what to say, but because, finally, they didn't have to say anything at all. A late snow came down thin and wet 2 mornings after their return, clinging to the spruce needles and darkening the soil beneath the cabin. Gilly stood on the porch with a tin pail in her hand, watching the flakes melt as they landed on the split-rail fence. She'd never seen snow this late in spring, and it left the world hushed, like even the land was holding its breath. Inside, Dain was bent over the table, carving thin strips from a block of tallow to make candles. His knife moved slow and sure, the same rhythm he used for everything that required patience. "You ever live through a May like this?" she asked, stepping back in and nudging the door shut with her boot. He didn't look up. "Once, in the Bighorns. Woke to snow inside the tent. My horse chewed through the ties trying to get out. You always talk like some part of you never left the trail behind." He set the knife down and stretched his hand, the joint stiff from old breaks. "Because I never meant to stay in one place. But you are." Dain met her eyes then, the light from the window catching the crease between his brows. "It's not the place. It's you." She crossed to the hearth, setting the pail near the fire to warm. "You always that plain-spoken?" "Only when I mean it." She knelt to stir the coals, letting the heat rise into her sleeves. "I've been thinking about the land just west of here. The flat stretch past the ridge. If it's clear enough, I'd like to break ground there. Grow something." He leaned back in the chair, arms crossed. "What would you plant? Beets, maybe? Onions? Something stubborn. Fitting." She smiled without turning. He stood and walked to the shelf where the small ledger book lay between a tin of matches and a tobacco pouch. "We'd need seed and a decent fence. Voss might still have that mule team come June." "We?" Dain looked over, one eyebrow lifted. "If you're planting, I'm digging. That's just sense." She straightened slowly, brushing ash from her skirt. "And if I plant more than vegetables?" He took a step toward her, quiet and deliberate. "Then I'll build whatever you need to keep it safe." She didn't speak right away. Her fingers curled around the edge of the mantel and her voice came softer. "I never let myself imagine a life past next week. Now I can't stop picturing it." "What do you see?" She turned to him. "You hammering boards while I yell about the line being crooked. A henhouse that always smells no matter how often I clean it. A pie that's too bitter because I got the sugar wrong again." His mouth bent, faint and slow, not quite a smile but something close. "That sounds like the kind of life most folks would chase hard." "I'm not most folks." "I know." She reached for his hand then, not like she needed anything, but like she'd finally decided something. He let her take it, warm and rough with work, and didn't say a word. Later, when they sat on the porch again, the snow had turned to mist. The grass beyond the trees gleamed wet and dark, and the wind had shifted east. "I've got a brother," she said suddenly. "Younger than me by 7 years. They kept him when I left." He stayed still beside her. "You want him here. I need him here." Dain nodded once. "Then we'll get him. You don't even ask how." "I don't have to. You say he's yours, and that's the whole of it." She looked out at the hills, the mist rising in low curls. "It won't be easy." "No," he said, "but neither were you." She didn't answer, just reached out and let her hand settle in his again. And for the first time, it felt like something solid had been built between them, not from rescue, but from all the quiet choices made since. Snow falling, sweat shared, silence respected. A life rising, slow and sure from the ground up. The sun crested low over the ridgeline, washing the fields in a soft amber light. Gilly brushed the lingering frost from the cabin window pane and leaned close to see the path that curved through the trees. No one had come down it since the last snow. But her thoughts had turned inward, past the creek and long ride behind them, to the boy left behind in a house that had never been kind. Dain came in from the lean-to, his coat damp at the hem, small burlap sack slung across his shoulder. He set it on the table and pulled off his gloves. "There's a man who rides supply runs through the lower Gallatin," he said as he hung the gloves to dry. "He's got ties in Helena. Said he'd carry word quiet if paid right." "How long till it reaches them?" 6 days, maybe 7. "If your brother's where you say, it'll take longer to bring him out." Gilly didn't sit. Her hands rested lightly on the back of the chair, eyes still on the frost-misted glass. "He won't fight it. He's not like me. He's still young. He watches everything. Knows when to keep his head low. But he'll follow if the hand reaching out is mine." Dain poured water into the kettle and set it over the stove. "Then he'll come." She turned to face him. "And if your man can't get him out? Then I go in." "You'd risk that. He's your blood. That makes him part of my life now." She moved toward him slowly, the wood floor cool beneath her stockinged feet. "You never asked for any of this." "I didn't need to," he said. It came with you. They stood close, not touching. Gilly reached up and traced the edge of his collar where the fabric had frayed. You've never had a family, have you? He shook his head once. Pieces of one. Men I rode with, a woman who let me stay once through a hard winter. But nothing that stayed. You'll have one now, she said. If you want it. His hand found hers, callous fingers folding around her own. I already do. By the time the letter was sent, the snow had melted from the bend in the trail. Gilly spent the days clearing the patch of land she'd chosen, stripping roots, piling stones, and marking rows with a line of twine and a whittled stick. Dain built a gate from old rails and repaired the north wall of the cabin where wind had always found its way inside. The answer came by rider 12 days later, tucked in the folds of a wool blanket. Gilly opened it with dirt under her nails, her breath catching as she read the cramped writing. He's coming, she said, voice low. A man named Anders is bringing him. When? Before the next moon. They'll ride quiet, come through the low pass. Dain nodded. Then we'll have his bed ready. She turned to him, eyes rimmed red but dry. He's never had a room of his own. He will now. The night before the boy arrived, Gilly sat outside with a tin lantern and peeled apples by feel. Dain joined her with a mug of boiled coffee and passed it to her without a word. Did you ever think you'd end up here? She asked. With a woman and a boy in a patch of stubborn soil? He stretched his legs out, one hand resting on his knee. I thought I'd die alone in a canyon with no one to mark where I fell. She looked over. And now? Now I think if I go, it'll be with your hand in mine. She exhaled, slow and steady. That's the kind of truth I can live with. When the boy arrived, he was thinner than she remembered, shoulders hunched like he was still waiting to be struck. But his eyes lit up when he saw her, and he let her hold him without pulling away. This is Dain, she said after a long embrace. He's with me. The boy nodded. He didn't speak much that first day, but he didn't flinch when Dain offered him a plate or when Gilly led him to the small room they'd made his. By the week's end, he was feeding the chickens and counting fence posts aloud to himself. He slept with the door open and never asked why no one raised their voice. One morning, Dain found Gilly near the field, her sleeves rolled and a row of green shoots just beginning to rise behind her. He's smiling now, she said, brushing dirt from her palms. He's got a reason to. I never thought I'd know what peace felt like. You do now. She straightened and stepped toward him, her face flushed from sun and work. Do you still want to marry me? I've wanted it since the moment you ran with me. Then let's not wait. They were married under the cottonwoods at the edge of the creek. Vows and her eldest came down from Absorki with a basket of sweet bread and a small brass bell for the boy who wouldn't stop ringing it all the way home. No preacher, no paper. Just a vow spoken with both hands held steady and the kind of silence that meant something real had settled between them. Years passed. The field gave onions and then corn. The boy grew into a man with strong shoulders and a mind sharp as flint. Gilly kept bees and knitted in the quiet hours. Dain taught the boy to track elk and mend tack. And when the boy married, they built a cabin farther down the ridge. Gilly's hair turned silver at the temples, and Dain's hands stiffened with each winter. But they never left the land. Never needed to. In the evenings, they sat on the porch, knees touching, watching the wind move through the grass they'd planted. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes not, but always they reached for each other's hands. And always they held on.